Will the Utah Jazz make history today? Because it is a very significant day for the Utah Jazz. I think everybody recognizes that. The NBA draft historically is where some of the best franchises in the history of this league have made their mark, whether that is Pippen, Horace Grant, and Michael Jordan, or Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. The NBA draft is critical, but here we sit at 6:30 in the morning on the day of the NBA draft, and the Utah Jazz don't have a single pick in this draft. Jake, how busy do you think the Utah Jazz will be today?
Yeah, I think they'll be quite busy. I think that the Rudy Gobert trade, in my opinion, again, this isn't sourced information. We haven't heard anything on this front, but I think, in my opinion, that deal will get done today. I think that, we've talked all week about how, the Bulls had to go and make some other things happen to acquire some draft capital to sort of top off the Rudy Gobert trade. That was sort of, our understanding. And I think that comes to fruition today. I think that happens. But again, just my opinion. As far as the actual draft and making picks is concerned, I'm not so sure that the Jazz will be super active from that standpoint. I think that it really depends on what they're able to work out in this Bulls deal. But I also think that Danny Ainge has made it very clear that the draft is not their number one priority right now. Remaking the roster is their number one priority. So I just think for the Utah Jazz, the organization, the Utah Jazz roster, like where they're at right now, I think because they don't have picks in the NBA draft this year, I think that their priority has been just to get deals done. And if they can get some picks out of that, great. But ultimately, the priority needs to be to change this roster, and they're going to do that through trades.
Well, and I think one of the biggest questions, again, for the Utah Jazz has to be, what's your priority right now? If you're the Utah Jazz, is your priority getting draft picks? Or if you're the Utah Jazz, is your priority remaking the roster of the top 8 guys that are going to contribute to this team, to the Utah Jazz this coming season? And I would tell you that I think their priority should be remaking their top 8.
Here's the game plan.
Yeah, I mean, honest to goodness, I think that the Jazz have a really big opportunity today to do something that this team's never done. And I think that's really an important point. I think that is an incredibly important point. And that is that you cannot do what this team, the Utah Jazz, have always done. And with all due respect to the Miller family and what the Millers did for this town and for the Utah Jazz and Utah Jazz fans, we can't continue to hope and believe that this Utah Jazz organization can operate the way that it always has, because it's always operated in a fashion that has gotten you close, but not over the hump.
Fast.
And going to the NBA Finals is great. Don't get me wrong. Going to, the Bulls and the Jazz and all those great series and the history of the Utah Jazz and all of that, I mean, it's special. It's unique. I completely agree with that. But it's time to win an NBA championship for the Utah Jazz. It's time to become that franchise that we've all hoped and dreamed for so long. Is Ryan Smith the right owner of the Utah Jazz to do that? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But my main point is, I think the Utah Jazz should not be trying to trade for a draft pick today. What the Utah Jazz should be doing is trying to remake their roster today and begin that process by trading Rudy Gobert today, Jake. I think that right there is singularly the most impactful move that this club can make.
We're getting somewhere.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that the Utah Jazz have progress that they need to make. And I think that it's just one of those things where it's time to, it's the talk needs to stop and they need to just make a move. Like you can only go so long without making a move here. And that's why I say, like, again, whether we're talking about the fact that they don't have a lot of leverage in these conversations or the fact that, they don't have the ability or the desire to wait the entire summer to get this going. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think that Danny has been on the phone for the Utah Jazz working these deals, like, for the last 2 weeks. I think that's absolutely been the case, and I think it's been in a long negotiation, and I think that this could be the culmination of it. Like, hey, the Bulls needed to handle some business on their side to get this deal done, to go and get that one extra pick to kind of cherry on top the deal to really solidify and cement the value. And that's what I think is going to happen. Honestly, I would be a bit surprised if we heard no, Utah Jazz news today, if there just wasn't a single thing that happened today. And I also wouldn't be surprised if the Rudy Gobert deal went down today. That's what I would expect to happen. Honestly, that's what I would expect to happen.
Yeah, I think I would be surprised if Rudy Gobert wasn't traded today. It's been very quiet, as you would expect. I mean, yesterday was a day where not much happened, although we're going to talk about this Jeremy Grant larceny, theft, however you want to describe that deal.
Right.
We'll talk about that in a minute, but it was unsurprisingly quiet yesterday, because yesterday is that day where you don't expect much to happen. Today, the day of the NBA draft, I think today is the day that you expect the Jazz to make that move. Because I think the Bulls are out there trying to get stuff done, but it's a very difficult thing to do. It is difficult to go and get draft capital, especially when people know why you're trying to acquire that draft capital. And I think what you're seeing the Chicago Bulls do is be very plotting and methodical. But again, I will tell you, I don't believe, and from what my sources have told me, I don't believe that the Jazz are willing to do a deal with the Bulls that doesn't include Patrick Williams. And the only way that you would be able to get around that is if the Bulls were able to give you, 3 first-round picks, and they're not going to do that for Rudy Gobert. You look at what the Bulls are trying to do. They're not trying to start over. They're trying to add to where they were last year and take that step forward, because the Bulls are not far from competing at the top of the Eastern Conference. I mean, if you remember back last year, there was a stretch where the Bulls were the number 1 team in the Eastern Conference.
All gas, no break.
Well, that might include rim protection, and there's no better rim protection on this planet than Rudy Gobert. I mean, the guy is absolutely the best defensive player in the paint in the NBA, and I don't think it's a stretch to say in the world. And if you're struggling to protect the rim, which the Chicago Bulls are, I think Rudy Gobert's a great fit there.
Yeah.
But the obvious issues are he makes $41 million, and the Jazz are asking, as they should be, a king's ransom for Rudy Gobert.
Yeah.
And if you're the Utah Jazz, I think there's something that's very clear here. You cannot sit still. And again, I maintain, and Jake, I know that we've talked a lot about this on the show, but I maintain that you cannot bring Rudy Gobert back. I'm not saying that any bridges have been burned, that any relationships are bad, because they're certainly not. But when you look at the chemistry issues that existed in this locker room last year, my opinion is the best move is you have to remake this roster. And when you have a guy making 23% of your salary cap that is in demand around this league, there's no better option to do that with on this team than Rudy Gobert.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't have really almost anything to do with Rudy himself. Like, I think that the bigger issue is just the dynamic at play with the guys that are around him. Just the same way it works for Don, it works for Rudy. And I think, the other thing is that Don and Rudy don't work together real well either. I mean, we would be probably having a different conversation if these two guys really liked each other and played well together, but they don't, unfortunately. And so now we're here. And so when I say that it's not optional to trade him, I don't mean from the standpoint of Rudy did something wrong or Rudy is somehow some cancer for this team, because he's not. I just think that you know what you have in this current roster. And again, just like you were saying, because he makes 23% of your overall cap, I mean, it's just an impactful thing to do to move that money and turn one guy into like 5 guys or 4 guys, whatever it ends up being, depending on the picks that they get. So that's why I say, they need to make their dollar go further than it currently is right now. And going further would also include more athleticism, better wing defense, all these areas that we've been talking to you guys about for probably the last 6 months or so. We've been having this conversation, which is literally insane. That's gone by so fast, I feel like. But that's the thing you have to remember, that this isn't just about moving on from Rudy. It's moving on from how the money's allocated to one guy on your roster.
Man, I think that's such a good point, and that's why, Jake, not only are you less attractive than me, but you're less intelligent. But that's a really good point. I mean, when you talk about
respect my privacy,
I kid. It's not a thing where Rudy Gobert is a bad basketball player. He's not at all.
Yeah.
And again, one of the things that we've talked a lot about on this show is Rudy's impact defensively. And I saw a bunch of people talking to me on Twitter yesterday about the fact that I said Rudy Gobert is responsible. He plays a big role in the struggles of this Jazz team on the perimeter in defense. And yeah, I do believe that. I think when you're Rudy Gobert and you are as impactful as Rudy is on this club, I just don't think that you can not wear a lot of the responsibility that comes with being one of the best defensive players in the world.
Facts.
And for me, Rudy Gobert is a guy that has a ton of value because he is so prolific defensively. But if we're truth-telling, and again, this show, is the truth in Salt Lake Sports Talk, I'm telling you that Rudy Gobert, his biggest weakness is his perimeter defense. He is not very good at defending the pick and roll, especially the three-point shot on the pick and roll. He has struggled to defend guys, whether it is Terrence Mann in the corner, whether it is Christian Wood at the top. He has struggled to defend guys when teams like Dallas, when teams like the Clippers, when teams like Houston, when teams like Minnesota have switched and isolated Rudy Gobert against a guard. Rudy Gobert has struggled to do two things: guard that three-point line and make a quick decision. And we've seen that repeatedly over the last 2 years. Now, is that Rudy's fault necessarily? No. I think Rudy Gobert is being asked to do a lot of things outside of his abilities. And anytime you do that, you're asking for trouble. And I think that's what you've seen with Rudy here. That doesn't mean that Rudy Gobert is a bad player.
I'm going to say this again.
By any stretch of the imagination, this does not mean that Rudy Gobert is a bad player. But what it does mean is that there's an opportunity to improve your roster and to improve your on-court performance if you're the Utah Jazz. And I think you do that by trading Rudy, adding perimeter defenders a la Patrick Williams, and adding draft capital. And if you're able to do that, you're going to get a player like Patrick Williams from the Bulls. You're going to get a pick probably at the back end of the first round, which in my opinion is a huge win for them. And if the Utah Jazz are able to do that, I think it's a win-win for everybody. Because again, I will say that sources close to Rudy Gobert have consistently told me he has not now, and at no time has he ever asked for a trade away from the Jazz, but he is open to relocation. He is open to a new scenario. And I think if you went to Rudy Gobert today and you said, hey man, you just got traded to the Chicago Bulls, your thoughts? Rudy Gobert's answer, in my opinion, would be, Salt Lake City's been great to me. I love it. I will always have a special place, but I'm excited to go to a club that can compete at the top of the Eastern Conference and potentially help them win an NBA championship.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how Rudy should feel. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, and I think if you're a Utah Jazz fan, the way you should feel is that we're chasing championships here. Yes. Ultimately, like I don't care, about the name on the back of the jersey. Honestly, if this was a conversation about Donovan Mitchell, I would be criticizing him about his mid-range game, about his lack of defense, his lack of leadership. Like, I think both of these guys have things that they need to work on, and I think that the trouble is that. And I feel like nobody likes it when I say this, but the problem is this is not a big man's league. You've got a couple of bigs that make big impacts because of their athleticism with their frame and their size, but one of those guys isn't Rudy Gobert. That doesn't mean he's a bad player. That doesn't mean he sucks. It's just how it is. Like, that's just the reality of the situation. And so I think, did Rudy ask for a trade? No, he did not. Him or me was complete trash, total lie. That never happened. But if you said to Rudy, hey, we're going to ship you out to Chicago or, Atlanta or whatever the case may be, probably Chicago. But, you get what I'm saying. Whatever team it winds up being, like, if you put him in a good situation, I don't think he's going to say, that he's upset about that. So I just think it's just what needs to happen. It's uncomfortable. Nobody wants to say we want to trade a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year guy, but ultimately it's a bad deal. They need to move on from it. And once that happens, you're going to see they're going to get better. And that's what we're all here for.
Yeah, interesting question this morning from Jake R. He says, with it being so close to the draft, do you really think a trade will be worked out in time to move Rudy and get picks? Or do you think the Jazz might move other roster pieces to get in? Well, what I think is that trades happen this close to the draft every year.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of trades that go down where a team will draft a player knowing that they've traded that pick. So let's say the Bulls and the Jazz make a deal, right? The Bulls are going to draft at whatever spot or whatever pick is traded to the Jazz, or if that is, some other team's pick, that team will draft with the Jazz direction. They're going to say, hey, we want you to draft Joe Blomey with this pick. And then that pick will be traded to the Utah Jazz. So that player becomes property of the Jazz. Not unlike Rudy Gobert, not unlike Donovan Mitchell. When you make trades like this, it is not uncommon for those trades to be made, before the draft, executed after the draft, and having a player picked for that team based on that trade. So, Jake, yeah, I don't think that's any big deal. One round left. What's up with you? Alex Chacon says, do we think Grant trade affects the value of Rudy on the trade market? I don't. I was a little surprised that Jeremy Grant was traded for draft picks. I was a little surprised by that.
Yeah.
I think when you look at the value that Jeremy Grant has supposedly had, because we've heard all about how many teams have been chasing Jeremy Grant, the Pistons 3-4 combo forward. His demand supposedly was very high, but that trade never materialized. And we talked a lot about that at the deadline, that Jeremy Grant was probably that guy that most people thought was going to be moved.
Yeah.
But that trade didn't go down. So what happens, it goes down in the summer. And I'm not surprised that it's Portland. I truly am not, Jake. I think he is a very effective running mate for a guy like Damian Lillard.
Yeah, and I think what no one's talking about, and the reason this deal got done the way it did, is because Detroit needs picks. Detroit is a team that needs to continue to retool and put guys around Cade Cunningham. That's ultimately what Detroit is looking to do. And by the way, sorry if there's any Detroit Piston fans listening, but I don't think that you got to be a title contender next year. I think if you're a Detroit Pistons fan, you're hoping to scratch your way into the postseason. That's what you're hoping for. So that's why I say Jeremy Grant is another guy that's a veteran on a really young team that needs to go. And so that's why he got moved for picks, in my opinion, because Portland's going to say, okay, well, you guys want to be in the draft. We just want to put someone next to Dame that can actually contribute and be a difference maker, that can really help him get to the next level. And I do believe Jeremy Grant can do that, because I got news for you. Nurkic hasn't been anything special for Dame. He's been solid, reliable, but he's not been that guy that's like, damn, like when he has the ball, we know great things are going to happen.
And I also think, obviously, the broken leg did not help that situation. But, I mean, he is, and I would agree with you that Nurkic is a guy that you would like to upgrade. So yeah, I don't think that's surprising at all. But the thing that it tells you is that there's perimeter guys with length out there that are available. And unfortunately, the lack of draft capital for the Utah Jazz probably prevented them from acquiring Jeremy Grant. Or a guy of that caliber. I mean, there's guys out there. Harrison Barnes is a name that most people think is available and could be had. Now, do the Jazz have the goods to make that happen? Probably not in a 1-for-1 deal. That would probably have to be a situation where a third team was involved so that the Sacramento Kings get draft capital out of it.
Did you make the Bulls trade before you tried to go and get Harrison Barnes? That'll tell you everything you need to know.
That's a great question.
You know what I mean? And that's why I say, like, there's incentive to get the deal done. When we talk about, hey, will deals get done tonight for the Utah Jazz? I wouldn't be surprised if the Rudy thing got done.
No, neither would I.
Because that gives the Jazz something to work with here. I can't express this enough that right now they just don't have a lot to work with, as far as like having picks and like having guys you can move. And like right now the Jazz are calling people and saying, hey, we want to move Rudy Gobert. Here's what we're asking for. Let us know. That's essentially what they're saying. They're not able to say, hey, we want to move Rudy Gobert and we're willing to include our second-round pick in 2081. They can't even say that.
2081.
You know what I mean? Like, they can't even say that.
I'm sorry, who's the projected first #1 overall pick in 2081?
I don't know, bro. I have no idea. I have no idea, bro.
How about one round left's comment? Bulls Jazz final would be icing on the cake for this upcoming season. My God. If the Bulls make a Rudy Gobert trade and then the Bulls and the Jazz wind up in the NBA finals, good night. Could you imagine that?
Be great.
That would be great.
Would the trade be worth it for Jazz fans because now you're in the NBA finals?
Can you imagine Don going to the rack trying to throw down on Rudy? Who wins that battle? Like, oh my God. I can't even.
Give it to me, man. I want it. I want it.
Oh, that would be.
I want it.
Jazz fans would be so thirsty for that. Are you kidding me? My God. Anish says, what about moving Bogey and Conley for wing length guy? Well, the question is, if you're thinking about trading Bogey and Conley in the same deal, I mean, obviously those are two aging players. And the question is, who's going to give up a young wing with length to get two aging players? I mean, is that a deal that could be done with a Miami for a Tyler Hero and a Duncan Robinson? I don't know. To me, that's not enough value. Yeah, I don't think that's a deal that I would do if I'm the Utah Jazz. Not. Yeah, I mean, obviously not.
Yeah.
That's a big question though. MC Season says, what do you think the percentage is that Jazz Bulls seal a deal? That's really hard to measure. Monday I'd have told you 85-15.
Don't lie to me.
Today I feel like we're probably somewhere in the 70-30 range.
Are we clear on that?
I think today's the day that it's going to happen. If that deal's going to go down, I think there is no more value than there will be today. I just think with the Utah Jazz and their needs, I think today is that day. Yeah. Good morning, Rudy Sanchez says, what's up? Sean Mirazinski says, if I was offered one pick for him, though, especially at 25 first, I'd hang up instantly. I'd want multiple firsts, preferably earlier than 25. Yeah, you would love to get that.
But the problem is, I think we would all love that. The problem with that logic is that no team needs to do that to get Rudy Gobert.
No.
The Jazz, you need to understand, the Jazz are over a barrel here. Like, I hope people get this. Like, they're not in a position to dictate to these teams and say, hey, you need to give us another pick. They're not in that position. And anybody negotiating with the Utah Jazz who isn't leveraging them and saying, hey, we know that you guys are basically maxed on your cap. You don't have picks right now. Like, anybody who is not leveraging the Jazz in that way is doing it wrong, frankly, just from a business negotiation standpoint. That's exactly how I'd be having the conversation with Danny Ainge. And I think that the Utah Jazz need to get this deal done simply to get the ball rolling on the rest of the season so that you can start moving the Conleys of the world and the Bogies of the world and really, frankly, even the Royce O'Neals of the world. These guys, you got to get it going because you want to get this roster solidified. Don't forget about the head coaching search, and then, you're right into camp. So, that's why it's so important to get this deal done tonight.
Yep, totally agree with that. James Knight says, love to see Aussie Dyson Daniels projected to go top 10. He is projected to go to Indiana, and he's a big dude. I mean, that's a 6'8", 195 guy that I think once he is surrounded by better talent, Dyson Daniels becomes a much better player.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that works. BB says, let's go Jazz. Hope they make some moves. Is that what most people are hoping for? I mean, I think one of the biggest questions is, what do you believe about this Utah Jazz team? And I know this is not the easiest conversation to have, but is this team still the team that is the Miller family and selling cars instead of winning games? Or is this Ryan Smith finally putting his stamp on this team? And I think one of the biggest questions this week after the jersey reveal and leading up to this draft is, do Utah Jazz fans truly trust Ryan Smith?
I want better fucking execution.
Well, you do want better execution. And I think the question is, do you believe that Ryan Smith will do what's best for the Utah Jazz? Or will Ryan Smith ultimately do what's best to sell jerseys and make money? And I think that's a big question. I mean, this is a guy that is not used to losing money. This is a guy who's used to making money. You don't become a billionaire by losing money, right? So, and I don't have any problem personally with making money. I think making money makes the world go round. You didn't buy an NBA franchise as a profit and loss statement. To me, you bought an NBA franchise to stroke your ego, to win games, to win championships. I mean, this is a franchise that has a fan base that is thirsty. There's no thirstier fan base, maybe Sacramento, but there's no thirstier fan base than this Utah Jazz fan base. And that's why I say I think one of the big questions that has to be answered right now is this version of the Utah Jazz owned by Ryan Smith any different than the previous incarnation owned by the Miller family, especially post LHM, post that run that got you to the Bulls, post Stockton and Malone, if you will? Is this organization, the current version of the Utah Jazz, any different than Gail Miller's Utah Jazz teams? The answer is I don't know, and the proof will be in the pudding. Action is going to determine the answer to that question, Jake, and I think it is one that you have to get because, again, not to be redundant, you can't keep doing the things you've always done.
Yeah, and I think that I think that I was not a big fan of how they rolled out these jerseys. I was not a big fan of how the UFC press conference was handled, or the lack of a conversation around, the community and like what the Utah Jazz specifically can do. We heard a lot of, hey, the community is going to be at Vivint and, that's kind of what our focus is. And I just would have loved to see more out of the jersey rollout. And I think when we talk about, is this Gail Miller's team, basically the same, version of it, just a different owner, or is Ryan Smith going to do things differently? I think that remains to be seen as well. But the thing is he has a choice here. And I think that's, again, going back to that question, which I think has been the best question so far, will they trade Rudy Gobert today in the NBA draft? The answer to that question that we get when it's all said and done tonight will tell me everything I need to know about Ryan Smith and how damn much he wants to win a championship. Because if you want to win a championship, you're going to get a deal done tonight, and then you're going to use that momentum to trade Mike Conley and Bojan Bogdanovic for younger guys if you want to win a championship.
Chris Trost on YouTube says, is getting Patrick Williams a must in a deal with Chicago? Yes, it is. In my opinion, I think if you simply take the trade that so many Bulls fans have thrown out there, which is Kobe White, Nikola Vucevic in a first-round pick, I just don't think there's a tremendous amount of value in that for the Jazz. You get a one-year deal in Vucevic, and you get a young point guard that has tremendous upside. But one of the questions that I think a lot of Jazz fans are struggling with is, have the Utah Jazz done a good job developing talent? Mm-hmm. And you said yesterday on the show, when you lit the entire Jazz Nation on fire, when you said that they don't develop talent. What do you mean by that? Why do you say that?
I don't think that the Jazz have done a great job over the years developing talent. I mean, look no further than the Dante Exums of the world. Look no further than the Rodney Hoods of the world. Like, you have a lot of guys in the past that you haven't developed. And everybody in the comments yesterday was saying, oh, well, they've developed Rudy and Don. Have they really developed Rudy and Don? Would Rudy Gobert have been a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year if he'd have been with the Warriors? Yeah, probably. Would he have been a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year if he had been with the Bucks? Yeah, probably. In my opinion, because look at what those two organizations do. Are you really telling me that the Jazz are developing talent on the level of other organizations in the league? I don't think so. And that's why I'm saying, yeah, sure, Don has developed a little bit, but he's done most of that developing with Chris Brickley, with all due respect. He's done most of his work outside of the season. You're not seeing huge improvements in season or any sort of development or anything in these guys' game while they're with the Utah Jazz. So forgive me if you think I'm being too hard on them, but I just don't see some huge development piece happening. And by the way, if the Utah Jazz were so good at developing people, why would they not have mandated that Rudy Gobert develop some sense of an individual offensive game? Just anything. I'm not even saying it's got to be some polished, Kobe fadeaway off the block. I'm not even saying that. I'm saying be able to rotate 180 degrees with your right hand, the ball in your right hand, and make a hook shot. Make a push shot.
I think, do the Utah Jazz develop players? Dante Exum is perhaps the greatest example of this because, and I know that James Knight is probably going to smash beer cans on his head when we say this, but Dante Exum was a complete bust. Yeah. I mean, he's a guy that when you look at who was drafted around him and you look at what you ultimately got from Dante Exum, that's a guy that you wish you had gotten more out of. And sadly, I mean, there are so many guys littered through Utah Jazz draft history just like that, who you picked, whether it's Rodney Hood, whether it's, you pick the guy. There's so many guys that you drafted and you missed on, whether that's Luka, whether that's Devin Booker's a really good example that comes to mind. There's just so many guys that coulda, shoulda, woulda, but never got a chance to wear the note.
Jared Butler.
And then and Jared Butler's another one that I would directly point to. I think this is why Will Hardy or, one of these other young coaches, and from what I understand, the Jazz are very high on Will Hardy. I think Will Hardy's a guy that is going to compete very closely with Johnny Bryant for this job. And I say that because you need a guy to come in here and put player development number one. And Danny Ainge understands how to develop talent. He knows how to build a talent development department that will further your assets. That's what this team needs, because when you look at the guys that are currently on this roster, Rudy Gobert is developed to a point. There is no doubt that Rudy Gobert is a prolific defensive player in this league. No doubt about that. And the Jazz deserve credit for that. They also deserve credit for the fact that he is unable to operate in the paint offensively. He is one of the lowest rated players in efficiency in the paint which is amazing to me. And the fact that his highest best use is a lob for a dunk is a real problem. And we could keep throwing out the fact that he shoots 70%. I don't care if he shoots 90%. The fact of the matter is those are dunks. I need a guy in today's 2022, 2023 NBA world who can give me a push shot, who can bounce the basketball without turning it over. That is certainly the responsibility of Rudy Gobert, but it is also certainly the responsibility of the Utah Jazz. And for all of the things that Donovan Mitchell does that are wonderful, he has not developed past the point of summer work, and that's on the Utah Jazz. Part of this is we live in an era where we had this major thing that YouTube doesn't let us talk about anymore, where you played in the bubble and you missed a bunch of games, and so practice time has become a premium. You just don't get full practice. You just don't get development time like you used to. But you've got to, at some point, own the fact that the Jazz have missed more than they've hit on draft picks. You've got to own the fact that the Jazz have not put the proper resources into developing guys like Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell.
Facts.
And again, I ask, is this organization any different under Ryan Smith than it was under Gail Miller? Because that's ultimately where we get the answer
What's been the difference?
to this question.
What's been the difference so far? It's been 2 years.
Well, not much. And if we're truth-telling, which is what we say we do on this show, the difference is Ryan Smith came in with a bang and it has been bust. Ryan Smith has not had much to crow about.
And even if you throw out the first year, like, hey, the first year was like the warm-up year. You know, I'm just getting my feet wet. I'm just kind of getting settled in the organization. All right, throw out the first year. Totally cool with that. But then this year, what was this year? You know, He's more than comfortable in his role. This year was, hey, I'm going to bring Danny Ainge in and hand him the keys to the organization. That's what this year was. That's what I've heard repeatedly out of Ryan Smith. And again, I'm not making assumptions. I'm going off of what Ryan is telling the media and telling the public in the very few opportunities and the very few questions that are asked of him. He has said repeatedly, Danny Ainge is driving the bus, man. I've given him the keys. His exact words were something like, you know, hey, I hire the best and let them do their job. Okay, great. But what happens then if it doesn't work out or it doesn't go the direction you want? Is that on Danny Ainge or is that on Ryan Smith if you're a Jazz fan? So that's why I say, like, that's why tonight is so important, man. The Utah Jazz have to do something in the freaking 2022 NBA draft, bro. A lot of teams are getting better tonight. Will the Utah Jazz get better tonight? I really hope so.
It's a big question. Gavin Rasmussen.
Hello.
Looks like Spurs are shopping Dejounte Murray. I think there's a possible deal for the Jazz. I do not.
I would love there to be, but probably not. That would be that's a guy that I'd be really excited about.
That's a guy I would trade Donovan Mitchell for.
Yeah.
I would move Donovan Mitchell to get Dejounte Murray. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Alex Chacon says Trey Burke, another example of a failing to develop talent. Yeah, absolutely right. You know, like that's
what I mean. Like, people can be pissed, but it's just the truth of the matter. Like, the Jazz are not elite at developing people. It's not where they are yet. And I really hope you're right. Listen, I want to make it clear. I hope they get better at it, man. I'm tired. Frankly, I'm so sick and tired of having the Rudy Gobert conversation. I'm so sick and tired of talking about them not being able to develop people and struggling and, like, you know, getting bounced out of the postseason in the bubble by the Nuggets and then getting bounced by Dallas in the first round. Like, it just gets tiring. Like, you got to take this next step as an organization, whether we're talking uniform rollouts and all the lack of social media you did on it, or we're talking about making trades and making sure your salary cap is correct so you're not paying luxury tax and not winning. It's cool to pay luxury tax when you're winning. The Warriors do it every year. But you can't pay luxury tax when you're not winning.
Yep, I agree. Havoc says, what do you think is the Jazz biggest barrier in trading three players but still contending? I don't know if it's possible. I think it is possible. I think, you know, that's a great question, by the way, Havoc. And I think the answer is the biggest barrier to contention will be their perceptions of what they have to get in return.
Mm-hmm.
Because the physical execution of the trade is unlikely, because I put a high level of belief in Danny Ainge. If you're trading three players, you're getting a lot of assets in return, one would think.
Yeah.
If you trade Rudy Gobert and you bring in Vus, Patrick Williams, and a draft pick, you're already a better team.
Mm-hmm.
Nikola Vucevic makes you a better team. Patrick Williams backstopping that trade makes you a significantly better perimeter defensive team. If you're able to hang on to Bogey, I'm a big fan of that. But your mental perception, it's what's going to keep you from realizing the reality you're hoping for. And so that's why it takes big balls to make big trades.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to have the courage. If you're a guy like Danny Ainge, and if you're a guy like Ryan Smith, you've got to have the courage to trade Rudy Gobert.
And when I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
But the question is, does Ryan Smith feel dangerous today? And the answer is probably not. And not to be pessimistic, but I mean, Ryan Smith to this point has not shown me that he's got the cojones to do what you got to do.
But seriously, on that front, I think I'm glad you brought this up. Do you think that Ryan Smith is super involved in the draft tonight? Do you think he's sitting next to Danny while Danny does his thing? Do you think he's in the bit? Like, I would guess he's in the building, but like I don't know. And this is what I mean. I'm not trying to be Mr. Negative about it or like be that person, but I really tell me if I'm wrong, please. Like, I would love some people to give me their opinion on this in the comments. Do you think that Ryan Smith is super involved tonight? Do you think he's in the same office as Danny while Danny's doing his thing? Like, do you think he's there? I have some reservations about that. I don't know if he's there or not. That's me just genuinely giving you my thoughts. No narrative behind it, no nothing. For me personally, the way I feel about it is I'm not sure that he's actually there tonight while Danny does his work. I would definitely be there if I was Ryan Smith, but I don't know if he's there.
I think he will be there. I think Ryan Smith will be there. I think he's a guy that he's somebody that I think knows when to be there and when not. I think one of the things that I got out of that presser the other day was that Ryan Smith understands what he doesn't understand. He hired basketball guys to do the basketballing. And I think Ryan Smith is smart enough that, yeah, he'll be in the room. He'll be a voice at the table. He won't be the voice at the table. I think that's Danny Ainge. And I think you don't hire a guy like Danny Ainge to then walk in the room and put your thumb on the guy.
You think Dwayne Wade's there?
I don't know. You know, he's kind of been around the world doing his fashionista thing.
Yeah. Which hasn't exactly been received well by the fan base, by the way.
I don't know.
A lot of haters on that.
You know what, dude? I'm so over the conspiracy theory Dwayne Wade's girlfriend's wife's mom's cousin's daughter's friend designed the Jazz uniform. Like, I don't care. They suck. You know who designed them? Ryan Smith designed them. Because he's the owner. The buck stops at Ryan Smith, right? Yeah. Like, I don't care who actually who actually designed the uniform. Ryan Smith approved them. And so for my money, I don't care if Dwayne Wade had a hand in it. Ryan Smith approved him. I don't care what they do tonight. I'm going to judge Ryan Smith on what they do tonight because he's the owner. The buck stops at Ryan Smith, right? You brought in a guy like Danny Ainge. Danny Ainge is going to do Danny Ainge. There is no doubt about that.
If you felt these balls.
Yeah, exactly. She-Sun says, trade Gobert to the Bulls for Vooch and Kobe White. Not happening.
No, it's not enough. Happening. I agree. It's not enough.
It's not enough.
That's just not enough.
One round left says, our development is really hit or miss. Neither Ty Corbin or Quinn really liked to run rooks. No, they didn't. I think that's an excellent point.
Another important factor.
That is an excellent point.
And it's an excellent point, and I think, again, the Danny Ainge thing, hopefully Danny Ainge prioritizes that because you're seeing the benefit of it in Tatum and Brown. You're seeing that directly.
I totally agree with that. Cade Christlieb says, no, I think Ryan Smith is too busy talking about a weird UFC fight at the Viv. Ouch.
But do you see what I mean?
My goodness.
Like,
that's
what I'm saying. Like, I think the fan, I think the fan sentiment right now is not super positive. Like, I think that people are a little frustrated with how the jersey thing went down. They're frustrated that the purple jersey specifically was essentially an insurance policy because nobody liked the new uniforms. And they're frustrated that Ryan Smith is doing appearances with Dana White in front of a brick fireplace talking about guaranteeing selling out the Viv for a UFC event instead of guaranteeing it's going to sell out for the Jazz in their new threads on the new court in a postseason game. That's what I think fans are frustrated about. And again, I would love to hear your guys' opinion on this because I want to know, like, how do you guys feel about this? I think it's one of the most important aspects of what's going on with the Jazz right now. Like, regardless of what happens in the draft tonight, like whether they do the deal or don't do the deal or whatever, and we'll talk about it tomorrow, obviously. But regardless of what happens with that, how do you feel about Ryan Smith when the season begins? That's what I'm waiting for.
That is a big question. Like I think you're looking at a situation where guys will be defined tonight.
Damn right.
Guys will be defined tonight. Ryan Smith will be defined as an owner. Danny Ainge will be defined as a CEO.
I want more.
Justin Zanuck will be defined as a general manager. And I think when you look at the moves that are ahead of this club and you begin to realize how substantial these moves will be, I think you have to understand that there's going to come a point where the continued, I don't know if failure is the right word, but the continued lack of action leading to on-court success is going to become too much for certain Jazz fans to handle. Mm-hmm. And I think already, and we can spin the way Ryan Smith spun and said that, well, when fans walk into the team store, they're buying the yellow shirt. Well, I disagree with that. I think that perception is always reality. The perception is that Ryan Smith hasn't won a whole lot since he walked in the front door. Frankly, since he bought the front door. Mm-hmm. He's not won a whole lot. And whether that is on the court, whether that is, any of the Mike Conley contract, the Rudy contract, the Don extension, what has really worked here since he got involved? Yeah. Saying that Joe Ingles isn't going to be traded, and then what everybody knew, Joe Ingles was getting traded. Mm-hmm. And you look at this summer has to be the beginning of something new. This summer has to be better than your uniform rollout was.
Razzle dazzle.
Yeah. This draft, these trades, this roster, your next coach, early results before the All-Star game leading into what could be one of the first crown jewels in your ownership time.
Yeah, dude.
The NBA All-Star game in Salt Lake City. It has to go well. And I don't know that Ryan Smith really appreciates that right now.
Yeah.
I don't know that Ryan Smith really understands that the Utah Jazz are in an incredibly important time. And I don't know. Maybe I'm naive. And I'm open to the fact that I'm naive. Maybe this is all they're thinking about.
Maybe.
But I don't know if this is all they're thinking about.
I just think it's really tough when you're an owner, when you're a new owner 2 years in, because again, I want to keep emphasizing that he's 2 years in. And I even write off the first year, as I was saying. First year, warm-up year, okay, cool. I'm not going to hold you accountable to anything that happened outside of contractual stuff because that's a numbers game, But I think that Ryan Smith is the guy. What he's doing is he's saying, okay, I hired Danny Ainge to do the basketballing, and then I'm going to keep doing the business part. But the problem is with that, if you're not winning and you're not getting wins in the basketball department, your jersey releases, the money side of the organization in terms of the connection to fans has to be on point. It's got to be really good so you can get those wins and so the fan base can feel some positivity so that you're getting the new jersey, all over the place in the greater Salt Lake area. I want to see the new Utah Jazz jersey down south in Utah County. I want to see the new Jazz jersey up in Park City. I want to see it around the valley, but you're not going to see that right now because of the way it's handled. So again, I don't want to be too negative. I just think tonight is a huge moment in time for Ryan Smith as the owner of the Utah Jazz.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Noah Francis, good morning to you. Thank you for the $2 tip. Appreciate it. He says, fellas, looking great today. Love the new setup. Hey, you know what? We have spent
10 G's.
It's
probably
10 grand.
Yeah.
We have really spent a significant amount of money. If you're new to this show, and I know we have a lot of new listeners to this show, we have really worked hard to upgrade our product.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff coming, by the way, in the pipeline.
People miring.
Yeah, people are miring, apparently. As we get through this summer, you're going to see that there's a lot of upgrading coming.
We're getting somewhere.
And it's just the beginning. We've added a significant amount of new equipment so that you have 3 cameras, and so you can see me, and you can see Jake, and you can see both of us.
And Mrs. Monty, by the way, Mrs. Monty has made her appearance on camera for the first time this week.
Yeah. We've added a new mixer. We've tried to fix sound.
Yeah, and let us know. The sound today should be really, really crispy. It should be. We tested it last night. We're going to get to that later in the show. But let us know.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously he just said it sounded good, so I'm glad to hear that. But let us know what you think. We'd love to hear your thoughts on it.